Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of We Just Feminism, where we try to answer some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, who are feminists, what do feminists do, and can feminism actually change the world? Well, the guest of this series will show you by example that not only does feminism have potential to change the world, they're actively doing it. My name is Aurora, I'll be your host, and joining me today is Hollay. If you enjoyed watching this, make sure to leave a like and maybe even subscribe so you don't miss on any future episodes. Be as kind and respectful as always in the comments down below. Now let's get into the interview.
I am ready whenever you are. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you for starters for being here today with me to talk about your new upcoming book and about the behind the scenes of being a feminist writer.
Thank you for that. I'm so happy to be here.
To begin with, can you please introduce yourself a little bit? What do you do? Where are you from? And what did you study and things like that?
Sure. So I'm Hollay Ghadery. I am a multi-genre writer and I live in rural Ontario. I'm also a poet laureate. I'm the poet laureate of Scugog Township. What I do is I write. That's one of my jobs. My other job is I'm a book publicist. So I work with predominantly small press titles in Canada to help them get more attention in the mainstream media, in kind of grassroots media, and just help people be more conscious consumerisms about the books we're buying and understanding to stay curious when it comes to reading and, the books that are being put in front of you. Not that they're not wonderful books, but there are also other wonderful books and even more wonderful books that don't have the marketing might of the big five publishers behind them. And you just have to, stay a little bit curious and you can find them too. Small presses are doing amazing things and small presses do have books at bookstores. They're just not the ones that are going to be featured on the big display shelves that are very costly to be featured on. That is what I do. And I'm also a mother of four, also a chicken and goat and dog mother. So, it's busy. This is my third book being published. My first one was Fuse, which is a memoir of mixed race identity and mental illness, was published with with Guernica Editions, and it won the 2023 what was it called? Oh, the Canadian Book Club Award, which was very, very cool. And then my debut poetry collection came out last year with Radiant Press. That's this one. I don't have a copy of my first book on me or right in front of me. And then Widow Fantasies is the book coming out this fall, which is published with the wonderful Gordon Hill Press. So there's a lot more to me. We all contain multitudes.
Of course, we'll get back to the Widow Fantasies. They had a very big honor to take a sneak peek into it and read it, so we're gonna go back to that. But for now, I just want to know, how did your passion for writing start? When did you first realize, oh, this is it, this is what I actually want to do in my life? What was that first story that you were very proud of?
I think where writing started with me was reading. I was always a very voracious reader, even as a child, reading Archie comic books, reading R.L. Stine, Christopher Pike, The Babysitter's Club, reading anything I could get my hands on. So I didn't necessarily think I wanted to be a writer. I just really loved reading. And then, once I started to write a little bit, I really liked it. Not that I was very good at it. I can't even remember. I think like one of the first books I ever submitted was to a primary school teacher. And, I put a lot of love into it. And I'm not saying it was a masterpiece. It was not. But I got some very critical feedback on it where they didn't buy into one of the central conceits of my story. And to this day, and I think any of my editors would say I'm very easy to work with, but to this day, I felt intense injustice over what that criticism was, because I knew my story held up. I knew that it worked. And this little nitpicky thing that this teacher kind of docked me marks on was something that was completely inconsequential, and it stood up in the story. And I, to this day, believe that, even though, I still have the book. I mean, it was garbage in so many ways, but the one thing that the teacher was, really harping on me about, I was like, no, I mean, that's anyway. So I think what that did is it fueled a little bit of, not anger, but it's not, because I wasn't angry, but just feeling injustice and feeling like, no, you can't tell me not to tell this story the way I think it should be told. And that's continued in my writing life to sort of be a theme where I'm doing things that for commercial writing's sake aren't really great decisions, but I stand behind them anyways. So it's just me being argumentative with the world. I think that's kind of where it started. Moving on, I slowly got better and better and better and better. I'm not saying that I'm great now, just better than I was then. And that's mostly, again, through reading very voraciously, listening to other writers, and reading everything I can get my hands on, from, the back of a cereal box to new releases to new to me books by authors I've never even heard of, translations, everything. I read a lot. So I think reading definitely started it. And then what continued it was feeling that some minor injustice had been done and I had to prove someone wrong.
And I can relate. I think a lot of us submitted our first stories to our primary school teachers, and for some reason they were very, very harsh about it. I have similar memories of like teacher just using that red pen and just like crossing everything out. No, you have to rework this. But it's a skill. Both reading and writing are skills that we can work on, that we can develop. And I think nobody should feel discouraged to, even if you fail, even if you write something that's objectively horrible, it's still you, and it's just a piece of you. You can add to it and make it better to time. So I love that you stuck to it. And who were the people along the way who helped you, who supported you, who proofread your work, who were there when you submitted, which is a very stressful thing to do, like to hit that submit?
Well, there was a creative writing teacher in my high school, and the name is completely escaping me now, which is terrible, but it was a creative writing class, and it was for people who actually wanted to write creatively. So that was very helpful, just finding a space of people. And I have to give complete credit to one of my best friends from childhood, Sheila Wills. Sheila used to come with me and do like little writing workshops at lunch at like the local diner. And, I think we were like, well, at least I was smoking menthol cigarettes at the time. And, eating Weight Watcher meals off the menu. And like, I'd insist that we workshop these things that, I'm saying I made her write. Maybe she would have written them by herself, but I don't think Sheila had any interest in being a writer. I just kind of dragged her into my obsession. But her friendship and her encouragement then was lovely, and it meant a lot to me, and I think about it quite frequently. And then definitely during university, Dr. Elizabeth Green, who was the contemporary Canadian women's literature prof at Queen's University, since retired, incredibly wonderful and helpful. And I credit Elizabeth almost entirely with refocusing me to Canada and realizing how many amazing Canadian authors there are. As Canadians, I feel like with film, with art, with everything in general, we tend to celebrate what everybody else does and view what we do as sort of like second rate. And Elizabeth debunked that stereotype for me and really made me understand how incredible the literature coming out of Canada is, specifically through the lens of contemporary Canadian women writers like Helen Humphreys, Joanne Page, Diane Choperlin, which was super lovely and wonderful. And then my Renaissance literature prof, Dr. George Logan at Queen's, again, he was wonderful. And I really was not the best at staying focused in essays. Trying to write about patriarch, I was like I kept on wandering and looking around at stuff and wasn't really the best. And he finally told me that I didn't have to write essays anymore. I could respond creatively. So I could write a sestina in response. And then I excelled when I could respond creatively to these, to other writers. And I didn't have to, theorize too much on what the hell was going on, because I just got bored and I really didn't want to do it, even though I was very interested in the literature. So that was very supportive of someone meet me where I was and encourage me didactically on an individual and personalized level. So that was wonderful. And then in my master's program, amazing mentors. Rue Borson was my mentor, the poet. There was Janice Kiefer Kulik, who was my nonfiction memoir. Catherine Bush, who ran the program. Connie, she created the entire program, so that was wonderful too. And just a lot of amazing people there who encouraged me as well. And then in my everyday life, there's writer friends like Lucy Black, and just people who encourage me constantly to not give up and keep writing, even when I'm like, oh, my idea is really silly and it sucks, and they encourage me to lean into my weirdness and not so much worry about what everybody else is doing and just focus on what I'm doing.
No, that's amazing. We need those people in our lives, those who will see us for who we are and then hold our hand while we do our thing, and then cheer us on for every little milestone and every big milestone that happens. So that's great, and I love that you have teachers who recognized your potential and your talent, and they saw a way for you to shine and then encourage you to do it. I believe that teachers are really important in that sense, and there is no need to put you in a little box and make you the same as everybody else and to write the same style as everybody else or the same topics as everybody else, because that will be boring. We're all unique and we can all share our own stories and our own styles of stories. I believe that each of us have a potential to one day maybe become a writer or just write our own thoughts for ourselves, our memories, no matter who we are or what our maybe difficulties are and things like that. So I believe these are the stories that are inspiring.
Yeah, I love so much of what you said. I think everyone should write. I always think how wonderful it would be in the world if instead of getting angry and intolerant and closing our minds and getting scared, because I think so much hate is based on just fear. Imagine if we all just like wrote through it. Not saying you have to publish any of it, but imagine if more of us just nurtured that form of creative expression. I mean, I'm a poet. I'm the poet laureate of Scugog Township, and so much of my role is just making people understand. I can't make people do anything, but helping people to understand how poetry is everywhere, and it's incredibly accessible to write. It's so democratic to be able to do. Like anyone can write a poem, and to kind of take away that scaffolding of pretension that has been built up, ambiguity around poetry, that it's something for some amorphous elite. It's like, no, it's for everybody. It's for us. It's anybody, any age. Even last year at Culture Days in Port Perry, I had 5-year-olds doing blackout poetry with me, where they were just black. Like, these kids can't even really read, and the poems are better than mine with what they're blacking out. I was like, wow, you don't even know what you're doing, and you're doing a better job than me. That's incredible. And I love it. And I don't view writing as anything competitive. I believe, as you said, like, we all have our own identities, we have our own lanes, things that just make us who we are, even though, of course, we all contain multitudes too. And I think if we just be who we are and don't worry about trying to be anybody else, then there is no competition when you're just you. You're the only you. So you're just competing against yourself and nothing else. So I hear about people feeling like, oh, it's such a backbiting world. Literature can be so competitive. Like, that is not my experience. I'm sure it is, but I just don't engage with the world that way. So, if somebody gets something that I would have loved or something that I would have loved for myself, I mean, that's when you practice sympathetic joy and you're like, wow, that must feel amazing for this person. And then you move on and you keep doing your own thing and you control what you can control and you let go of everything else.
And actually writing is a form of self-care, because as you said, we can work through our emotions, but just even setting time aside and write and be alone with our thoughts and give our thoughts value enough to be written down, which is something that has been denied to many people throughout the history, mostly women, because women weren't allowed to read and write. It was considered hysterical, let's just say, and it wasn't tolerated much. So it's a way of self-care, it's a way to be rebellious, it's a way to exercise agency as people, because we're making that mark, we're putting our thoughts, we're taking a screenshot of our own thoughts and putting it on paper. So I believe it's beautiful in its own.
It is. I do think there's a massive difference and distinction that I just personally have to make about, and I said, imagine if we worked through our hate and our anger and our fear with writing. That'd be amazing. That can be, I think, incredibly cathartic, but I do think that writing for the purpose of publishing isn't necessarily cathartic. And what I mean by that is, like, writing, journaling can be such a wonderful therapy. But when I'm like writing, let's say, my first book, Fuse, which was the memoir of mixed race identity and mental illness, I talk about my struggles with addiction, eating disorders, my relationship to sex. I talk about self-harm. I talk about living with obsessive compulsive disorder. and anxiety and depression and a whole lot of stuff. And that wasn't like the idea of maybe journaling about that could have been cathartic, but the act of putting it together consciously as a book, like as an art or an artifact, and crafting that's just work. Like that's not cathartic at all. The original like kind of diary-esque writings I did where I was working through stuff, yeah, that felt cool. But the actual process of creating a piece of literature is like not necessarily cathartic. And I think that if you're using the act of publishing something as catharsis, like it's not going to be very cathartic at all. And I also don't think that people should publish the journal entries that they're doing that are cathartic, because they're usually like very self-involved and navel gazing, and the literary quality is not great. Like there might be some gems in there that you can like reach out and break out, but like as a whole it doesn't really stand. Even Lucy Maud Montgomery like had all her journals published after her death, but she whether she did or not, but the fact that somebody may have published them for her, obviously, or I don't know if she gave express consent to have them published, but she did like rip out pages and rewrite and edit things, which suggests that there was a knowledge that they'd be looked at when she was gone, which suggests a kind of curation of information. And that's what you do when you're writing for the purpose of publication. I don't necessarily think everyone is cut out for that, but I do think everyone's cut out to write for the purpose of, healing and understanding themselves more and understanding the world more and other people more. Absolutely. So yeah, just for my own personal sake, I have to say that, because people are like, oh, writing your first book must have been so cathartic. I was like, not in the least. It was horrible, and it was such a drag, and I'm glad I did it, but there was a lot that went into writing that book that didn't feel very nice.
You get through that first rush of, I'm just pouring my thoughts out and everything is beautiful and optimistic, and then you get to that point of editing and then it gets scary really, really fast.
Like, I have to create something readable out of this. Oh no. Like I remember meeting one poet who said to me, oh, I don't edit my poems. Whatever comes out is just what's meant to be there. I was like, those are probably some poems that need some polish then. Let's see them, because sometimes there's lightning in a bottle, and your first draft of something is almost like perfect. But for most of the time, you have to work and rework and leave things alone and come back to them with a clear head, and do other stuff and gather wool, and then finally something comes together. But I think that writing for healing is so great. It's just, like I said, I just really, when people ask me about it, because I do get asked so much because of that first book about writing mental illness and writing wellness and writing spirituality. I'm like, again, that first draft or that, just mind dump you're doing can be very helpful for healing. But everything else, if you're aiming to publish that and create a piece of literature from it, okay, that is not so much fun. It can be fun, but there's also moments of intense frustration, which I never find when I'm just like mind dumping something. If I think too much about it, like, oh, it should be like this, it's like, ugh, all the fun is ruined. It's gone.
Yeah, I get it. I've been on the both sides of both writing and editing, and getting the feedback and giving the feedback, and it's tough on both sides. It is a hard work, but it makes it like reach its full potential, I believe. Like, editing is everything, both in movies and in writing, so I believe it helps. But how do you deal with your inner editor, your inner critic, inner censor, and how do you confront the blank white page when you first start writing?
I think because I'll always consider myself a poet first, that I never have blank pages. I have notebooks filled with like sentences or thoughts or something, like an image that occurred to me. So I usually always have like a jumping off point somewhere. And I don't get annoyed by, blank pages don't bother me, because I'm of the belief that inspiration is a little bit insipid and it's fleeting and it's not useful to get caught up on inspiration. So writing's just work. It's just sitting your butt down and writing, and just accepting that a lot of it's going to not be very good at first, and that's what editing's for, and just working. So I don't get tied back by that. I find my biggest challenge is because I'm a book publicist, I tend to put everyone else's books before my own and everyone else's work before my own. So, I'll be talking to someone like, oh, could you please talk to my client? I'd love them on this podcast or this newspaper or the show or whatever. And somebody be like, hey, are you ever interested in being on? I'm like, only if there's time. I want you to put these people first. And it's because it's not because I'm so self-sacrificing. It's nothing to do with that. It's the opposite of that. It's because, number one, it's my job and I want to be good at my job. And it's also because seeing other people happy makes me happy. Like, I get a really big kick out of it. So I'm more interested in what's happening with my clients. And I also find other writers and their work far more fascinating than my own. It's like, oh, it's okay. And it's not saying that I don't want any coverage. I obviously do. It's just, I'm fine. I don't get caught up in, writer's block or anything like that. Publicity block, yes, for my own books, but not writer's block. And again, most of it's just, I don't worry too much about inspiration. It's not going to happen. Every now and then this great sentence comes to your head or this great image, and yes, write it down. You get little flashes, but inspiration isn't going to sustain you for the whole book. You're not going to live in that euphoric flash of inspiration while you're writing the whole book. A lot of it's just going to be like, this sucks, and grinding it out anyways. I mean, I used to play poker, and it's like just a grind. I'm an addict, so I don't play anymore, but it was just, it's grinding stuff out when you want to give up and make bad decisions. You just keep going.
I love that you are open about the struggles that you have that are outside of the writing itself, but in publishing, because most people forget about that part, especially now considering social media and everything. You have to be present, you have to put yourself out there, you have to do the podcast and everything else, but it's tough. It's like, it's not something that anybody teaches you how to do. There is not like classes on how to do that. It's not even if you're studying creative writing and things like that, nobody actually talks about that other part. When you succeed, what do you do?
There's this image that which I even had before I started publishing, which was like me, like Jo March in my attic, writing the masterpiece like Little Women, and just amazing things happening. And the truth is, you have to put yourself out there. You have to be out there. This isn't the 1930s anymore. There's not all these different media outlets that are dying to talk to writers. Book spaces are shrinking. Art spaces in general are shrinking. There's less funding for the arts. There's less media coverage for the arts. It's very frustrating, but this is also where I find community building and celebrating platforms like your own and other platforms that are filling those spaces, individuals who are filling those spaces, and let's celebrate them. Let's get people to talk to them, because it's traditional and legacy and earned media. Traditionally, all those traditional platforms may be shrinking, they are shrinking, but there are amazing people doing other things in new media that we can focus on, and we can celebrate them and support them with our views, with donations when we have money, with sharing and liking and engaging with them, that can, again, fill up that space. And I don't think that enough is done to make people aware. The media landscape for the arts sucks, but also it doesn't suck if you just like turn this way a bit and look and focus on other things.
Yeah, there are always creative new ways to guerrilla our marketing strategies, and doing it community based is, I believe, the way to go for many things, including promoting books, especially, as you said, because art spaces are shrinking, bookstores are closing down, and even libraries are, it's getting harder to gain access to libraries as well for some people. So it's crucial for us to find ways to both provide space to highlight the work that writers do, and for people to just enjoy the art of reading and of just not doing anything else but reading and thinking and working on your own views of the world around us.
I agree.
Can you tell us a bit more about the River Street writing and the values that are behind it?
Yeah, of course. So River Street started because I've been working in communications for 20 years, but mostly with like businesses and with especially corporations. And then for a spell, I was in corporate America. And then one of my big contracts ended, and I kind of wanted to just not work in corporate America anymore, or not really work with businesses so much anymore. They did me no wrong for 2 decades. It's nothing against them, but I just like I'm 43. Well, at the time I wasn't 43, but I was like, I'm in my 40s. I need to start doing something else. So River Street started just as a collection of freelance writers. That worked in businesses. But even during that time, we were doing things like talking about words and having fun with words and funny words. And like our Instagram posts were about words. And we do these things we called power Q&As, because I was also a personal trainer for about a decade. And so I always thought about power squats, or when you're getting the most out of a very small movement. And the power Q&As we did during this time, even before we pivoted like into book publicity, where we'd reach out to authors I knew because I did my master's. I had connections, and so I reached out to these people like Stephen Heighton, Diane Choperlin, and Tanis Rideout, and I got them to do these like one question, one answer power interviews where I'm not taking up much of their time. I'm just asking for one thing, and then I promote them. And that was just like a personal hobby. It really didn't have anything to do with what was making us any money, but that's what we did. And then when I left the corporations, I was like, ugh, like I wanted to go work with like the WWF or some kind of nonprofit, especially an environmentally social justice based one that I felt passionate about. And one of my writer friends, again, Lucy Black, was like, I think you should go into book publicity. You'd be perfect. And I was like, oh, I don't really know. And I was not sure about it. I kind of thought that was like a little bit close to home. But when I spoke to the other people who work with me, everybody was completely on board, and we just started doing it with Lucy as my first client, and we were very adamant not to take up anybody else's space. I know there's a lot of wonderful publicists, so what we focused on is scalable solutions for small presses and small press authors in Canada, where it's not that we poo-poo traditional and earned and legacy media. We do obviously approach them, but we also look for other more grassroots ways, especially ways with new media platforms and in-person events, and just again engaging new ways to find authors and books meaningful and lasting readership. So we're interested in building relationships between authors and books. And we understand that sometimes, yes, a review in the Toronto Star is a wonderful thing. I love it when my clients get mentioned in the Star, but it's not necessarily what readers are paying too much attention to. Readers pay attention to other things as well. I mean, I'm not saying that none of them pay attention to the Toronto Star. That's completely false. Of course they do. But there's other ways to get readers' attention. And word of mouth, book clubs, just getting buzz talking about that book. And to do that, you have to meet readers where they are in their silent book clubs. You have to meet them at their library book clubs, meet them at bookstores and online as well. And, think about things like inclusivity, diversity, accessibility, that, how do we make getting this book and interacting with us accessible for people? So that's where we lie with our values, because, I always think to myself that, I'm very community based with my writing, and with my writing. My writing's not necessarily, but with the way I talk about books. And, I'm a member of the National Book Critics Circle, and I review books, never books I represent, but I review books in general, at least a couple times a year. And I review books constantly on my social media pages, just books I love. And I often think to myself that, I worry that I come across as like too golden retriever energy, that like, oh, this girl just likes everything, which is not the case at all. I mean, I just don't say anything about books that I don't connect with. That's all. I read a lot, and there's a lot that I don't talk about. But I also feel like I don't view this community building that I'm attempting to do as, transactional, and I don't expect anything in return for it, because there's been this kind of void in my life where I felt excluded and lonely a lot of it. So books were always there. books were always joy, books were always connection and magic. And I still remember the feeling, and I'm almost crying thinking about it, of the first time I read Daphne du Maurier's Frenchman's Creek. Like, that book just made me so happy. Henderson the Rain King by Sal Bellow, which is of course incredibly problematic, but like, to me it still holds up, and I don't judge that book through the zeitgeist of now. And to me, like, the things that are problematic about it, Sal Bellow meant to be problematic about it. But like, or reading Babsi Sidhwa's Cracking India. The first time I read Through the Sad Woods Our Corpses Will Hang by Eva Famari. Like, these books that, like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about them. That's why I do it. That's why I do it. Is because, I was a lonely little kid and books make me happy, and I carry that little kid with me everywhere, and I feed her joy as much as possible. Of course, like, when I have a client, there's obviously there's something transactional going on there. There's money being exchanged, but I read books before I even agree to represent them, because I have to love them. And a lot of the platforming we do on River Street and on my own personal page is not for clients. It's just like, oh my gosh, I love this book, I want to talk to this author about it. Then I'm contacting their publicist, or contacting them directly if I know them directly. And I'm a co-host on Howl on CIUT FM, which is U of T's literary arts program. And that's not transactional. I don't get paid for doing any of this. So for me, it's just joy. It's just absolute bookish joy. And when I have people, and I do have people, especially because I've started running a series called the CanLit Crowd, which discusses kind of the cone that is CanLit through the lens of literary citizenship and community. I have people being like, oh, I don't like the transactional part, or this is a circle, literary community is just a circle jerk. I'm like, well, I think you're doing it for the wrong reasons then. Like, or at least you're not doing it for my reasons, which is the wrong reason. I mean, you can do whatever you want for your own reasons. But I mean, because I'm not doing it expecting anything in return ever, I just do it because it's like my only hobby, I guess. I have my family and stuff, but they're not really a hobby, but it's just what I love to do. So, yeah, I think River Street and then me lead into each other that way. It's just supposed to be an open, supportive place that's very porous, and people are readers and writers, and whoever is just welcome to join us and talk about books, talk about the literary arts, talk about our lives if we want to, talk about how books affect our lives, whatever. And as long as it's done with good faith and respect, anybody's welcome.
I love it. I totally agree. Books are magic. Books help us not to feel lonely. Every week I would go to my city library when I was a child. I had my favorite librarian and everything. Like, I would make sure that I come to the library when my favorite librarians are working, so I can chat with them. And the worst thing was during summer, when their hours would be shorter, or when they would close down for vacation days. Like, what am I gonna do? Because you can only take 6 books at a time. Like, that's not enough for a week.
Oh, it's not. It's never enough.
And I love that you mentioned. I love that your approach is to only talk about the books that bring you joy and that make you feel all fuzzy inside, and it's contagious. I found you on Bookstagram, and when I read your reviews, I was like, yes, I want to meet you, I want to work with you, because it's really good. It's very motivational, very optimistic, and it is building communities on something more than just some fleeting trend of these are the books that are appearing on New York Times or whatever reviews, so everybody will read them for a week and then people forget about them and they'll end up in a second bookstore like a month later and things like that. And there are books that we read that stay with us forever, that make us have the goosebumps and all of that. And I agree that not every book is for everyone. Like, we are all different, and different books will be suited for us. So it doesn't make sense to shit on some book because you don't like it, because somebody else might find comfort in it.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm also aware of how fickle I can be. I mean, one of my favorite books of all time now is Crackpot by Adele Wiseman. But I hated that book when I first read it in university. I mean, Elizabeth Green, again, my contemporary Canadian women's lit prof, I was like, why is this garbage on our syllabus? Like, I did not like it. She stood by it. I was not connecting with it at all. And I was very vocally not connecting with it. Thankfully, before the advent of Bookstagram. So I didn't say anything. It was in my 20s. I may have said something unkind and silly. But I read it. I was like out of books to read. I was pregnant with, I think, my second child. And I was like, oh, I'll read this again, whatever. And it occurred to me as I was reading it and as I was older that what I didn't like about the book was what I didn't like about myself or the world. Because in Crackpot, it's the story of a girl who grows into a woman. Her name is Hoda. She lives kind of in a semi-slummy area. Her mother is, I believe she passes pretty early in the book. Her father's disabled. He's blind, and she turns to sex work to make ends meet. But her whole life, she's just so hungry. I mean, emotionally and physically just hungry. And she's gains quite a bit of weight, and she's quite large. And I was expecting some, and I'm not going to give away the book. I did in one interview, and I was like, no, not doing that again. There's some incredibly weird twists and turns in it, but she makes some really morally, not even questionable, they're just morally wrong decisions. And not the sex work, it's other stuff. The sex work, I support sex workers, not that. But she's, having sex at her father's house, like working with people at her dad's house, and her dad can't see it and is kind of oblivious to what's going on. And I kept on expecting the arc of this story that she smartens up, gets her life together, and loses weight, because that is the princess narrative, that makeover is going to happen. She's going to stop being so big and so annoying and so brash and so sure of herself. She is such a, I said arrogant to myself then, but she's just confident. And like, you think, why is this chick so confident? She has no reason to be confident. That's what I used to think. But when I read it again, I was like, except for one very questionable moral decision, you go, girl. Like, when I read it again, I'm like, good for you. Like, and it was a complete, like, I got more of a handle on my own disordered eating and relationship with my body. And my eating disorder was under control. And, I'd been through a lot of therapy, and reading it again, I was like, this is such an incredible book, speaking to how the expectations we place on women. It fights against that, and it does it completely effortlessly. It just shoves Hoda in everyone's face, and Hoda is not the problem. Books are mirrors. What you see back is the problem. So that's why I try not to say anything about books, because I'm like sometimes I will never get into a book. I will never be the reader for the book. But in general, I also understand that relationships with yourself and in the world, and therefore relationships with books, can and do change. So I'd rather just shut up and not say anything.
Yeah, but I appreciate that point, that maybe a book was not right for us in a specific moment in time, especially when you're a teenager or young adult and you have to read stuff for school. And of course it sucks because it's for school, you have to do it. So it doesn't have that same joy. And it does not relate to you because you still haven't had those experiences or those journeys of growth to understand and relate to the story. And then afterwards, when you have them, you go back to those stories, realize, oh wait, this actually is something that I can learn from and that can be like helpful or joyous for me. So it is sometimes good to go back and read some stuff that we thought was horrible. Sometimes it's just horrible and nothing will change.
It's sometimes tough, and to our aesthetic, it's objectively horrible. But I mean, I read a whole bunch of Sweet Valley High books about 3 months ago, and I don't know why. And I recently heard that the original author, Francine Pascal, had passed away. But I read all these Sweet Valley High books, and I used to devour them as an adolescent, like just eat them up. And I read them all again, but I was like, no wonder I had an eating disorder. The writing is predictable and comforting, but it is not like anything. It's not masterful or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with the writing, but it's just like, okay, like it's exactly what you'd expect from the book. And I still read them all, so obviously I wasn't, I'm not poo-pooing it. It was a very nostalgic experience for me, but I remember them being a lot deeper than they are.
Speaking of bad books, currently we have an issue of a rise of horrible books written by AI, not even written by real people, and those books end up on Amazon or on Bookstagram or BookTok or whatever, and people will buy them and read them and realize it's just a bunch of garbage because just words piled up together, sometimes according to some formula of storytelling, most times not even that. It's made by some shadow people, who knows what, and even some writers who are publishing their own books, like actual books, are using AI to like cut corners with editing or to like enhance their styling and everything like that. How do you see that trend of AI in writing, and how do you see it as a publisher? Is it a problem? Are we gonna see like a stamp not made with AI or not written with, by AI and things like that in the future? What do you predict for this trend of AI in writing to go forward?
I don't know what to predict. I hope that writers keep being celebrated for the people who are doing the actual work. I mean, even AI has learned everything AI knows from actual writers. Like, it's not like the machine's doing it better. The machine's doing it faster for sure. But it can only do what it does because actual people have taught it to do that. It's used the works of actual writers to learn how to do this. So it's a absolutely a shortcut. For publishing, I mean, every publisher I work with does not accept anything generated with EI or AI. I mean, there might be a exception if it's like if it's something generated with AI with the purpose of examining how something generated with AI works. But I'm fairly unequivocally against it when it comes to literature. I mean, if you want to use it to help with your accounting or your taxes, sure, but there's even some things that it can't do that you just need an accountant for, like I'm not against AI across the board. I just think I'm not even against AI necessarily across the board completely in art if the AI is being used as part of an artist's exploration of how AI works or technology, and it's very clear this was made with AI. I'm not necessarily against it that way. But I had someone once show me a description of my second book, which was the poems, that was generated by AI. And this person was arguing that because of this description, they want to buy the book. And I was like, well, there's another description that I wrote on the back of the book that's actually accurate, because what this AI has generated is wildly inaccurate about what the book is about. Even the tone of it was so off from what the book is actually about. I was like, oh my God. And I took such incredible offense to the fact that this person had even generated this based on my book. And some people might think that's extreme, but I think we really have to protect art and our artists, because we're not making enough money. We're not rolling in it. I think Hollywood has really messed people up with like what writers' lives are actually like, when it's like this writer has this awesome penthouse apartment and is like always out at galas and stuff. It's just like, no, that's not the way it is for 99.99999% of writers. Most of us struggle, and most of us have day jobs, and most of us never have any mass critical success, which is fine in my opinion if you're doing it for mass critical and commercial success. Again, you might be doing it for the wrong reason, and again, the wrong reason is not my reason, which doesn't actually make it wrong. It just makes it different. That doesn't resonate with me. Like, that kind of rejection doesn't resonate with me because I'm not doing it for that reason anyway, so that's fine. I mean, of course, critical success and commercial success are wonderful things, but you can't expect that. But AI is making it seem like this is so much easier for writers to obtain. This will do this so fast, and it will be done so well. And as you said, it's might be fast, but it's not done well most of the time. And if you try to look up yourself, which I haven't done because that would mean using AI, but if you try to look at yourself, my writer friends who have done it have been like, it's not even accurate what it's telling you about yourself. Bio it gives of you is, I don't know where they're getting the information from, but it's wildly inaccurate. So, I mean, I'd recommend not using it in general, because it doesn't do its job even effectively. That might change, but you're still standing on the shoulders of writers who have actually done the work and writing that has actually trained these programs. And that's just unethical.
Recently, there was a controversy when it turned out that Google Docs is paired with ChatGPT or whatever AI, and they're stealing people's drafts to create prompts for the AI. So it's literally unethical and illegal. Let's be honest, it's stealing people's ideas and thoughts. And what's more valuable than that? It's like the only thing that we actually have and own in this life are our own thoughts.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I hope that legislation keeps being pushed forward to punish those who use it unethically and to prevent further unethical use. I'm certainly, happy to be part of organizations that are doing that. But in the meantime, all I can do is not contribute to the problem.
Let's go back to your own writing. In your stories, you're sharing some of your own stories, you're sharing stories of other people around you, and you're sharing those hidden stories. So what are those stories? Where do you find them? And how do you decide what stories are the stories that you want to tell? What is the process behind it?
Like with Widow Fantasies, it's the story was very much like the title story was based on, I talk about this a lot, the fact that I kept on fantasizing about planning my husband's funeral. Never that I killed him or anything, just that he was not here anymore. And I felt such relief, but also I was really unsettled because I had sensibly loved this person. Why am I having these fantasies? I was even having dreams that he was just gone, and I felt this tremendous relief. And I never thought about this about my children. Like if I wouldn't even I can't even think about them not being here. It makes me want to vomit. Like I feel sick to my stomach. But I had no problem doing this with my husband, and I spoke to my therapist about it, these fantasies I was having, and apparently it's quite common for women, especially women in heteronormative relationships, who bear the brunt of that second shift work, the work after we're done working, the child rearing, the permission forms, the always being in contact with the school and setting up play dates and driving kids around, and dentists and doctors and haircuts and hospital visits, and it's all up to the women. For a lot of it, women are still doing the brunt of the domestic labor. And so when you have these partners who are supposed to be partners but feel more like dependents, it's easy to grow resentful, because like your actual dependents, your children, they didn't sign any contracts saying that they were coming into this world going to do half the work, right? Or at least contribute to the workload. Like they're here with no agency over being here. But presumably the person that you're with has agreed to be there. So the fact that my partner was here, but just not doing much, or he'd do stuff if I asked him. But like, I was still getting tired of these conversations of having to ask all the time. It was just like, I'll just do it myself. And then that weaponized incompetence of, well, how do you do this? Like, oh, can you send in a permission form? I've forwarded you the link. Well, how do I log in? How do I do this? It's like, oh, I'll just do it myself. Like, this is so annoying. Like, I have 4 kids. I don't have it's easier and faster for me just to do it myself. I had to figure it out myself. I'm sure you can too, right? Like, and so I was getting very resentful. That resentment manifested in these fantasies. So again, spoke to my therapist, and she was talking about how fantasies can be incredibly helpful to helping us find out what we want from our life, but it doesn't necessarily mean we actually want the thing that we're fantasizing about. Like, you can fantasize about a threesome, and maybe for some people that might be wonderful and it's a fantasy come true when it happens. And maybe for other people, it's like, wow, what I really just wanted was more quality intimacy with my partner. We needed to shake things up a bit. We needed to hit refresh on our relationship. I didn't actually want to bring someone else into our relationship. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean what you're fantasizing about what you want, but the fantasy is usually, if it's recurring enough, kind of a sign to interrogate those feelings a bit. So that's what I did. And this main story, Widow Fantasies, came out of this, but like, it's not even about us. I use that jumping off point. It's based on something that my husband told me about, how somebody he knew, something that happened to somebody he knew, something very tragic that happened to somebody he knew. And we live in like a rural community, and very agriculture based, and so a lot of the stories are set in that kind of rural setting. And I think Nancy Jo Collins said it's the domestic rural Gothic. And I was like, yes, that's it. Like, it's very Gothic in feeling. So like some of them are from my life. There's one about a goldfish that's very much based on my life. Not all of it, but the main part about a woman, I'm Iranian, a woman celebrating Nowruz. And then when Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year, is over, she's grown really attached to their Nowruz goldfish. And why is she so attached to this goldfish? She has a husband, she has a child, what's going on? So I basically just started thinking about, what have I heard women talk about, or what have I fantasized about that's really dark and really taboo? Like, you wouldn't want to talk to people about it. And then what I did was I wrote about it. And sometimes when I had people that knew I was writing this collection, I had one writer friend come up to me and tell me about something that happened between her mother and father and said, I will never write about this, but I'd love you to. And so she told me maybe 3 sentences of something that happened, like an exchange that was had between her mother and father. And then I just took it from there and I wrote about it because I found it very powerful too. So it's kind of a collection of women using fantasies or the act of fantasizing to deal with the bullshit that they experience in their lives, or try to work through their lives. Not everything's a direct fantasy. It's just like a loose theme around what's going on. But yeah, that's how it started. This was actually a lot of fun to write because I got to learn so much about the people in my life and around me when you start asking people questions. But I made sure not to like lift anybody's experience or story. Like I may have taken like the impetus for the story, but then I kind of went completely on my own. And I'd say over half of them are just based on things that have happened to me anyways. So probably more like 80%. But it's not autobiographical, so nobody needs to alert the police or anything.
No, but it is a beautiful piece of work, and I love that rural Gothic reference, because it really is. I mean, in my I'm preparing the review for it, and like I made a little note, luminescent morbidity. It is glowing, but at the same time it's very, very morbid and dark, and there's a lot of discontent, but on the other side a lot of passion, and it all feels very relatable because I've heard those stories from other women around me, or when I was a kid and you hear the older women talking because they think that kids are not listening, and then you hear stuff, not just stuff on the internet when you see somebody making an anonymous confession or something like that. Those are real stories, like everybody can find themselves in them. I experienced goosebumps, I cried a little bit on some parts made me laugh, and it's very raw. Like, it is a beautiful piece of work, truly.
Thank you. So I'm so glad that you said it's glowing, but it's dark, because that's, I mean, not that I'm glowing necessarily, but I think I come across as a generally happy, personable person. But like, my specific kind of OCD I live with is called existential OCD. So that's OCD that is obsessed with ideas of mortality, and not in like any kind of cool goth way. It's like I'm terrified all the time. That's why I was an addict. OCD is about control, and what's the one thing that none of us can control? What's going to happen to us, right? So, and if you notice, I'm not even using certain words because I can't, or if I do, I'll have to undergo some like huge tick ritual that I don't really want to do on screen. So I'm just trying not to use certain words. But that's like, I live with like absurdity, and I try to use humor to make my life bearable. But the truth is, like, I'm a pretty dark person underneath it all. And I tend to stare and get involved with dark things, even when I know I shouldn't, even when I know it's going to end badly for me mentally. But this collection was a fun way for me to explore some dark things, but do it in very short stories, and also like just be absurd too. Like, just enjoy my absurdist response to mortality. I know that not all of them are funny, but some of them are meant to be funny. Like the one with my kid's favorite one, like, your shit don't stink, about the guy who comes home and ignores his family and goes to the bathroom and like spends an hour in the bathroom when his wife's been, juggling the kids and has a job of her own all day, and she's ready to like that is very much based on our which is why my kids just love it. Like, it's supposed to be funny though, because, and one of the reasons I can be funny about all this sometimes is because I had these issues with my husband. I talked to him. We've been married 16 years now and we have 4 kids. Like, we're still together. Everyone keeps saying, oh, your husband's such a saint. He's so nice, to have this book out called this and you'd be talking about your marriage. I'm like, listen, he was not always a saint. I trained him. I didn't train is the wrong word. It makes him seem like a dog. Being with me encouraged him to think about the way he was living, interacting, observing the world. And because he loved me, he was willing to do these things. He now is a free range chicken. He takes care of responsibility without me asking him. I will be like, oh, I have to get the kids in for the dentist. I missed their appointment. He goes, oh, no worries. I already rescheduled them. Like, yes. So discussing these things with him was so important because I was deeply unhappy. I didn't realize I wasn't straight until my mid-30s, mostly because I'd hated my body so much. It didn't occur to me to like people with a body like mine. It didn't change the fact I still loved my husband and was happy being married to him. But, the realization, which it wasn't a realization to most people. I remember when I tell my husband, he's like, listen, I think you're the only one who didn't know that you're not straight. I was like, so like nobody was in the least bit surprised except me. But so that, there's some queer stories in there as well. That kind of helped me work through some of that stuff too. Or I'd already worked through it. It helped me express it in hopes that somebody else might see themselves, because I am amazed. Like, it is a phenomena on TikTok, the amount of 30 something to middle-aged women suddenly realizing we are not straight, but we have been conditioned. Like, we might not be lesbian, we might still be attracted to men, but we're also attracted to a lot of other people. But we've been conditioned under the patriarchy to despise our bodies to the extent, and even despise each other, other women to an extent, or other non-males to the extent that it would never occur to us to find that person attractive. So like, this was kind of a stepping stone for me to start talking about that. And then my novel, which is coming out in 2026, like really forcefully goes into how women uphold the patriarchy through a very absurdist lens, because the whole thing is narrated by a sock puppet. So, I if I can't have fun with these things, if I can't laugh, I'm going to cry. So I have to laugh, because otherwise I'd spend my whole life crying. And I still do, obviously, very frequently. But the laughter at least keeps it moving. So yes, thank you. I'm so glad that you liked it, and I'm so glad you saw those attributes to the book.
No problem. Would you like to share, maybe do a little reading for us of one of the shorter stories in the book? My favorite is The Purple Bears. I would like to know the story behind it.
Did you want me to read Purple Bears?
If you want to, but you can choose whichever you want to share. But I would just like to know, like, behind the scenes of that story.
It's pretty simple, actually. The behind the scenes of Purple Bears is that somebody beat up my kid once, and I wanted to kill them. It was another child, and I wanted to actually kill violently the other child. I felt like it was, I shouldn't say I wanted to. In my head, I was fantasizing about killing the other child. I wasn't taking any action to obviously do it, and I never would. And I can say that with complete certainty that I wouldn't have done it. It's just that I was furious. I was furious with the child. I was furious with parents that would let their child do that, even though I'm completely aware that many children are free agents and behave in ways that their parents do not approve of or would not approve of. I get that. But my initial reaction was just this fury. But I was also trying to be a good mom and raise a good human being. So I didn't really want to voice to my child this fury. So what I was saying, my child knew I was angry that this had happened. But he was also really young at the time. So me being angry and scared is only going to scare him. So I was trying to be more comforting and kind of mama bearish than ragey, which is what I felt. So that's where this story came from. It's certainly not like a blow by blow of what actually happened with us, but in a way it's kind of like encapsulates the way that I emotionally felt this story. So I will read it. Purple Bears. Can you see it, baby? Your safe place? In the woods behind the house, where the cedar trees lean towards each other and make the big tent. The boy nods. His bedside lamp glows visceral pink. Good, the mother says. Now picture you're there. The child nods again. The nod is small, obscured by his soft, worn quilt, which is pulled up to his ears, in his position, curled onto one side, shoulders rolled in. Am I alone? The boy asks quietly. Do you want to be? Yes, please. He puts his thumb in his mouth. Okay, you're alone in the big tent. Now, what are you doing there? Sniffing, he answers over his thumb. What do you sniff? Trees, wind. The boy pauses. Then there's a wet pop as he takes his thumb out of his mouth, and something spicy. He's losing his lisp, but buried underneath the quilt and blankets, the mother knows his elbows are still wrapped in layers of baby fat, like succulent, precious scrubs. The boy breathes deep, and the air filling his lungs pushes against his ribs. He shudders, eyes squeezing shut. The blood in his mother's ears begins to pulse. Her eyes fill mercurial red. She lifts the hand to caress his hurt, but stops, her hand hovering. Instead, her fingers find the boy's hair, an abundance of milkweed floss exploding from his head. The mother swallows and steadies her voice. She repeats, "Your safe space, baby. Are you still there?" The boy says nothing. She continues, "Can you still smell the cedar? Feel the roots under your feet?" A whisper, "Yes, Mama." "Can you see little spears of sun through the cedar boughs?" A nod. "Here, no one can find you unless you want them to. No one can touch you because you're amazing, baby. You're magical, and you can be anything. So what do you want to be?" "A bear," the boy says shyly. The mother can see a ripple beginning of a smile in the corner of the boy's mouth. "A bear, how wonderful. Are you a black bear, a grizzly bear, a sun bear?" "I'm a purple bear. A purple bear, magnificent. And what do purple bears do on sunny days in the big tent?" "They sleep." The boy's smile deepens and spreads to the other side of his mouth. "I love a good sleep, too." The boy rolls onto his back, taking a moment to measure the pain before continuing. Purple bears also like to play with their friends. He says this from behind fistfuls of quilt, which he's clutched in his hands and pulled up to his chin. In the nimbus of the lamp, they're drifting in the belly of a peony. "And Mama," the boy uses one finger to motion her down to him. She inhales the sweet apple scent of his bubble bath. Purple bears are kind and strong, but they don't push small bears at recess. They don't stomp and stomp on them until they cry. The boy puts a small hand on his mother's cheek. "Does that sound right? Is that what a purple bear should do?" The mother rests her forehead on the boy's and closes her eyes tight. She sees the boy on his back in the schoolyard, his blue and yellow spring jacket streaked with mud and his arms over his face. The bigger kid is standing over him, foot raised. She pictures a purple bear emerging from the tree line at the edge of the schoolyard. The bear's coat, shaggy, caked with mud and reeking of Quran. Now charging across the field. Now eyes glowing crimson. Now teeth bared and sinking into the bigger kid's flesh. Now gulping throatful after throatful of blood, shaking, shaking, and shaking until he's perfectly, satisfyingly limp. The mother wets her lips. "Yes, baby," she nuzzles her nose against the boy's cheek. "That's exactly what a purple bear should do." Thank you.
It's beautiful. I cried a little bit again. It's very. It is a short guidebook actually on how to talk with kids about some issues that happen to them, some experiences that they might have, and it's a grounding experience for the parents as well. So I believe this story can showcase another way of like taking care of your child and taking care of yourself while taking care of them, and to provide the kid with some hope that there is always somebody to protect them.
Exactly, because I mean, when I wrote this, I've been reading a lot of Robert Munsch to my kids, and I started to realize that some of the language was seeping in, like when it's like magnificent, you know what I mean? Like the way that Robert Munsch, like, there's a little bit of Munchism in in this book, and you know, I even had one reader say that, I mean, people, if you're watching this, you know that it's about a boy being bullied by another child, but I had somebody say that until that point, they weren't sure what had happened. That it could have been an adult who had done this to them. They weren't sure. And I was like, no, I wanted you not to be sure, because I just wanted the violence to exist in and of itself, and the pain and that moment of the mother and their child at bedtime being there in this pink lit room. I just wanted it to just exist. And I didn't want to draw too much other stuff into it. And I think kids are just exceedingly cruel to each other sometimes. So I wanted to, discuss that, but mostly just wanted to discuss my rage-filled response to somebody messing with me. It was dealt with, but I do have a bit of a reputation among the children at my children's school for like calling out other kids and stuff like that. But I'm the same with my kids. Like I constantly tell my daughters, I say, check your 3 C's, which if you're catty, competitive, or critical to another girl or woman. These are no's. This is upholding the patriarchy. This is not something that is going to happen. If you find, so like I absolutely call my kids on BS too. And my kids are not perfect. Nobody is. Which is what I just kept reminding myself when this had happened to my child. So but yeah, that's even a tough one for me to read. I was like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
We're nearing the end of the episode, so you mentioned already some of the books that you're reading, but what else are you doing or listening to or watching that brings you joy and that provides you with inspiration, or just lets you rest for a little bit?
It's a good question. I got my kids finally into The Last Unicorn, which has been nice. Do you need something? Come here. Into The Last Unicorn, which was made in this is one of them, made in the 70s, and America does the soundtrack, and it's really weird. Like, it's a really weird movie, but they're watching that, and that's brought me joy, seeing them connect with something that I loved as a child. What else am I reading? Oh, reading. I'm reading a graphic novel right now, and I don't read a lot of graphic novels, and it's just a shortcoming of mine that I intend to remedy, but I'm moderating a panel for a literary festival. So this is one of the books that is on the panel. So I'm really enjoying that. I just finished reading Jean-Marc Assan's Kilworthy Tanner, which is a fabulous, funny, kind of filthy and unwashed but sophisticated feeling book that takes a very critical and absurd look at literary arts culture in Canada specifically, and that's amazing. That was amazing. I've read Off the Tracks, which is about train travel. It's a nonfiction book by Pamela Malloy, and I love trains, so that was a really fun book to read. I've just finished reading the poems Baby Cerberus by Natasha Ramatar, which is like pop culture and poetry, and like it has like Tamagotchis and Final Fantasy and like about video games, and kind of brings poetry and pop culture together. And it was a really great book too. I read more than I watch. I'm watching The Boys. I spend most of it just like with my 14-year-old, I spend most of it just going, just tell me when the grossness is over. I can't, like, he just ripped somebody in half like a phone book. Like I can't. So, but it's like bonding time for us. So if I have to sit for an hour like this, that's fine. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I always watch The Golden Girls. I love that. I love Murder, She Wrote. I love stuff like that. As far as like artistically what I'm reading, I just read everything. I read whatever people put in front of me. I'm also a juror on a couple poetry award juries, so I am reading a lot of poetry, like a lot of submissions for those right now too, which obviously I can't talk about. So
I just submitted a poetry piece a few weeks ago, so maybe.
You never know. For everyone, it's all blind judging. I don't know who's who, so I can't tell. There's no favorite. I don't know who anybody is.
I'm not expecting any favors. It just this is my second time ever submitting, and it took me a while. Like, I saw like the call for submissions and everything, and I was like, oh my god, this fits perfectly. I just wrote it a few weeks ago, and it's like the theme and everything, the keywords, it has it all. And then I didn't do it for a while because I was scared to do it, because who am I to send poetry to be to even be scored, not even published, just like to take time from the reviewers and jurors and to make them read it. It just felt wrong. Like, no, who am I to do it? But then I shared it with a friend, and she told me like, no, it's great as it is, do it, just send it. And then I sent it, and then I shook like this for a while afterwards. But we'll see, maybe.
Why not you? Like who is anybody else? I mean, I think I have a very early memory of being an MFA student and being at a writers' festival and having one particular very well-known writer just treat me and the people I was there with like garbage. And it was just very, very rude experience. And I've always gone through my life. And even then I thought, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, it's such an absurd thing to think that any of us are better than anyone else. I mean, I love a quote. I forget her name, which is terrible, but she was Miss America. She was a lawyer. She died of suicide, unfortunately. But what she said was, the only people who care about our accomplishments are people who want the same things as us. And that keeps me so humble. Like, yeah, I can get a publishing deal or win this award or something, but like when I go out into my life, and of course writing is my life, that's part of it, but a more balanced view is like when I look at the overall picture of my life, nobody cares. Like, nobody freaking cares. So yes, be happy about your accomplishment, but why does my accomplishment matter than someone who's just been named employee of the month at their work or has some other, career based accolade given to them that I've never heard of? Like, it's just, or, a kid who does really well on a test. It's like, I don't know. I just think it's not staying humble, because I've never felt anything other than like a complete fraud. I'm already here. But you see some people get a small taste of, their thimbleful of power, and it's like they become Machiavellian with it or something. It's like, what are you doing? Who are you? So yeah, why not you? And keep submitting poems that you think are good. My the title poem of this collection, Rebellion Box, won the 2022 Nick Blatchford Award for occasional verse after 14 years of being rejected over 100 times. So I'm always like, if something's working and you've had other people read it and you've, given yourself time and space to look back and like tweak and edit, and something's working, just don't give up on it, because art is so subjective. And sometimes it's just, who's the juror or the three jurors looking at something. Somebody else would have picked something completely different. I've been on juries where my favorite book doesn't even make the long list, because I had to compromise and nobody else felt the same way I did. So it got completely knocked off. So I think having a healthy understanding of how things work and believing the people who say you're good, what you're doing is great, just believe them and keep submitting.
Well, thank you for the encouragement. And I believe that this applies actually to many things in life, for all the people watching and listening to this, who might want to do something but are just scared to make that step, to make it official, to make it professional, to stop it from being something that you just do for yourself, and try to take your own rightful space in the public to share that work. I believe that all of us can take this, what you just said, and apply it to feel more comfortable and confident in doing that step.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just think, why not me? Why not? Like that's it. These spaces, that shouldn't be reserved for anyone in particular. It should be anybody. It should be anyone who can do what they're supposed to do should have access to these spaces. So again, that's just all part of my kind of porous approach to the arts, of not elevating like three elite above everybody else. I get very frustrated on behalf of books that I love, that I like can't find the coverage I believe that they deserve. I get very frustrated. I get a little bit tenacious too. I haven't done anything like untoward yet, publicity wise, like showing up at a reviewer's house and handing them the physical book, but it has occurred to me to do that before. Like, yes, say yes and take the damn book. You will love it, I promise. That I do get frustrated when I see works I love not getting the attention I feel they deserve, but I try to take deep breaths and remembering that not everyone else has to share my opinion, and people are entitled to their own sanctity of space.
Yeah, but you're doing your part in it. You're creating that space where indie artists can be recognized, where community can gather around artwork that is relevant to them, that makes them feel all the feelings they want to feel, and that can encourage them to use that work to grow, to do something themselves and things like that. So
thank you. And like, if anybody's watching this, join us at River Street Writing. We're at River Street Writes on Instagram, or on Facebook, or on TikTok, very hilariously on TikTok. And what I mean is, like, my kids are always like, you don't even know what you're doing. I'm like, I don't care. That's fine. The author Catherine Mockler once talked about TikTok as being like her sandbox. And that's how I kind of view it, as we're just playing. We're just having fun. We're not necessarily trying to go viral. We're just trying to like hold our space there, and anyone's welcome to come sit with us if they're respectful and kind people. Don't have to share our opinion. Not everyone has to share our opinions about everything, but we can be respectful. And same with Instagram. I mean, that's one of the reasons we do a lot of organic content, like the interviews, and we create a lot of our own content that we put out there, because that way we don't have to rely on anyone else to publish what we want published. Our community is amazing, and they're there and they're responding to our work. And it's also why we'll often do stuff if somebody reviews our books. We'll often do reviewer spotlights, because, as I believe I mentioned, I'm a member of the National Book Critics Circle, and I think reviewing is such a critical part of being a writer, being able to review and respond critically to work. And I really think that we need to, even if reviewers aren't writing their own stuff, if they're working solely in the realm of criticism, or even just reviewing books on Instagram, which is where 90% of my reviews come from, where I do most of my stuff. Even if you're just responding to books you love, I believe these people need to be celebrated too. So we'll often ask people who've been on our community for a while if we can spotlight them, and we can like shout them out and what they do. And they're like, well, I'm just, I don't even do anything with books. I work at as a law clerk, or, oh, I'm just home on maternity leave, or, I work in, tree planting, whatever they do. I'm like, I don't care. I want to hear about you. Like, I think that, the readers need to be elevated to the people who are doing the responding to the books and helping us build our community, and who are taking chances on these books that, again, you're not going to see everywhere. And that's not because they're not good. It's because their publishers aren't one of the multinationals with massive amounts of marketing dollars to put behind them and buy up these ad spaces. And multinationals are not evil. I'm not suggesting that. It's just why, and I love a lot of books published by multinationals too. It's simply there are a lot of other really amazing, equally good, if not better, books out there. And I'm encouraging people and readers to be conscious about their buying habits, or their borrowing habits, or their reading habits, and kind of stay curious and read from the other places too. And if you follow us, we have so many of these books. We don't have all of them, but we'll often, like, we just did a post, and I think it was my turn. So what I'm reading now, and I was talking about Daniel Maluka's debut poetry collection, Unwashed. And it's kind of like an Afrocentric, perspective on, immigration and family and desire and belonging and all this stuff. And he's not one of my clients, but I read his book and I was like, I want to talk to you about this, and I want you to do this, and I want to invite you on one of the radio stations I host. He's not my client. We're not, of course, we promote mostly our clients, but we're also really happy to talk to other people about other books. And even I talk about books I don't represent all the time.
It makes no sense to be selfish or to gatekeep, or to say, no, I have personal benefits from this, so I'm only going to do this. Like, no, it's larger than us. Reading and writing is something that we do in communication with the whole civilization of people, not just people who are with us right now, who might read while we're here, and then there will be people who will find it in 200 years. Maybe it might end up as somebody's thesis on a literature university.
You brought up, that's such an astute point. I always say to people when I'll reach out to someone and they'll be like, oh, I can't review the book, for the next couple of months. I'm really tied up. I always write back, books have long lives. They have incredibly long lives, longer than us. So I'm not worried about you reviewing the book this month. If you can't get to it till next year, but you still want a copy, I will send you a copy or a PDF or whatever you're asking for, if you'll do it. That's all I'm asking, because we're all busy. I'm not asking for people. our community reviewers, like, and we invite everyone who has a bookstagram and, you know, can review. And what I mean by can review is like more than one sentence, not like I like this book. Like my husband tried reviewing once and it was like, I like this book, I'd recommend it. I'm like, dude, that's nice, but can you say more, please? So I had to like sit there with him and like, but I again, that's fine. He works in like building houses and stuff. And whenever I try to help him with something around the house, he usually sends me away because I'm annoying him too much and not doing anything right. So we all have our strong points. But like we welcome people in and I'm just like, no, you can, like, you don't have to get to this book next week, next month. If you would like to read it, cool. I'm not here to put more pressure on our community members. It's like when you can do it, it's like if you're saying like I can't get it till 5 years, well, maybe before that. Like again, books have such long lives that I am so happy if a book is being talked about next year too. Like I don't need it talked about this second. Whatever. I try again, reading should be joy, and I don't want people, I mean, I don't want to feel pressured to read and like read quickly. I don't want to put that pressure on anyone else either. It's like, relax. I hope this is a joyous experience. Don't let me pressure you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I love to, if I can, if I have the time for it, at least half an hour a day to read it just for joy, not for university or for whatever else. Not something that I have to do, just something for me. But it doesn't matter how many pages you read. Like in that half an hour, I might read a 15-page article, or it might be 100 pages of some very easy book, like very easygoing. But it doesn't matter. It just, I allocated that time to spend it with myself, with my thoughts, to learn something new, to, you know, relax. But on Bookstagram or Book Talk or whatever, we have a lot of creators who are pushing for that. No, you have to read 100 pages a day, you have to read one book per week, and that's 52 books a year, you have to mark it all in your journal, it has to be a competition, you have to show it all, like your progress throughout the year, and then if you slack, you have to make up for the lost time. Like, no. Like, who made it homework? Like, why?
I believe you're doing your PhD, correct? I have nightmares. I did my master's and I have nightmares about having to go back to school because of the amount of reading. I mean, I think of all the books I read in school that I would have enjoyed so much more if I'd just been able to read them at a leisurely pace. The last thing I want to do is pressure people into reading. And I also tell people constantly, if you start reading a book and you like, especially one of our books, and you find that it's not for you, you don't have to finish it. Like, you don't have to review it. You don't, if you want to, go ahead. Like you can speak constructively about a book. Even that's cool. I'm not stopping people from giving less than stellar reviews. I want honesty and thoughtfulness. But if you don't want to finish, don't worry. Like, just if you can remember, just send me a message saying, yeah, not doing this. That's cool. Like, I don't want people to feel on top of every single pressure we have in our lives. Like, I'm sure you have this too, where you sometimes feel like you're going to hyperventilate. Like, you're like there's just too much. Like, your inbox is swelling. There's so much pressure. There's so much you have to do. It's like, I don't want to add to that. That is the last. I have reviewers that have taken a whole year off and are like, talk to me next year. And I have an email scheduled to like follow up with them in 2025, because I'm like, cool. But I know there's other, I know they're called influencer programs. At River Street, we don't really have that. It's just like, if you want to come hang with us, come hang with us. Like, that's it. And they're like, well, other influencer programs are like, you have to review X amount of books a year. I'm like, no. Like, no, do what you want. Like, as much or as little as you'd like to review, I'm fine with. I'm not here to pressure you. Because if I feel like one more milligram of pressure on me, I'm going to crack. So I don't want to do that to anyone else.
Yeah, I agree. I love that you're nurturing that safe space in which creativity can actually shine. And that's the most important part. That's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you need anything, let me know. I mean, when I say anything, if it's like you need me to pick up your kid from daycare, I might not be able to do that if you live in like BC. But like, I have met such wonderful people across the country, even across the world, through doing this. And I have like met wonderful people like podcasters. Shout out to a novel, it's a novel review podcast in England, where this random podcast in England, I globbed onto it, and I loved what Seamus was doing, and then I was sort of like pushing my books. But it's just so wonderful, and I love listening to all his books. And like he was talking about Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar once, and saying like it's really good, but he had some legitimate criticisms of the book. I was like, finally, someone else is talking about this, because I felt like I was the only one who had criticisms of that book. Everyone like holds it up, and it's like, oh, like. I call it the Emperor's New Clothes situation, where it's like, can no one else see the Emperor is naked? Why am I the only one that seems to have a problem with this? And so when somebody else can see what you're seeing, it's very validating, especially with a book. Like when you're talking to bookish people and you get like passionate about a book, and some people might be like, oh, it's just a book. It's like, no, it's our lives. It's a reflection of our lives. It's our feelings. It's our thoughts. It's our responses. It's our desires, like reflected back to us. And how can you not get passionate about that?
Yeah, there are some life-changing books, and it might not be the same book for everyone, and it might not happen in the same moment in people's lives and things like that, but there are some books that you read them and they stay with you, and they influence the way you look at the world around you, and the way you connect with people, and the way you chase your own dreams. Like books have that power. Books are magic.
They truly are. And I have to go to the library tonight. My librarian called me. I have a lot of things to pick up. And I said, in addition to like the other books I requested, like ordered in from other libraries, I said, can you just pick me up an array of smut? Like some really smutty novels. I said, if there's a man in a kilt on the cover, it can go in. I need some queer, some kind of queer smutty novels in there too. Like maybe some fantasy smut too, because I've just been doing such serious reading lately, and I think all books are important, especially the smut, because I call it junk food for my brain. It's like I am tired of eating apples and spinach. Apples and spinach are wonderful, they taste wonderful, but I just need some popcorn, like drenched in butter. Give me some smut. So she's like, I will pick out some custom smut for you. I'm like, thank you. And I think smut is important. I have read some really good and well-written smut. So
who has it? And that's the power of the librarians. Like the good librarian will know you through your history of recent borrows, and because of your interest and everything, and they will pick that perfect books for you. They can do that. So it's always good to be on good terms with your librarian, because they can find out anything for you, and Canada has great programs of exchange between libraries, between cities and in countries. So it's possible when you go to the library in your hometown, you're actually accessing libraries across the world, and that's amazing. Like we need more of that.
And I mean, when people are just like, oh, I want a book, but I can't afford it. I'm like, first of all, if you're with us, if you're reviewing for us, we send you the books for free. So that's it. But if you're also like me and you're getting to a point of like not having any more room for books, or having to like get some out of the house, libraries, that's what they're there for. I mean, you're supporting an author when you request their book at your library. Authors in Canada, we have the public lending rights program. So I get paid when people take my books out of libraries. I get paid more when my book is in more libraries. So if people are requesting authors' books into their local libraries, like, can you buy this book? We get paid for that. So I'm always like, you support authors by reading their books in libraries too. And I mean, you support an author when you rate them favorably if you sincerely like the book on Goodreads, when you talk about their book on Amazon, when you talk about their book at family dinners. I mean, there are so many ways that you don't have to spend a dime to support an author. And a lot of those ways, ask your librarian to do it for a book club, for the local book clubs. Ask them to say to the librarian, like, there's 20 of us and we really want to invite an author to this library to do a reading. Can you help us make that happen? I mean, there's just so many ways to support the arts that don't involve you spending any money, because I know most of us, especially those of us who already work in the arts, where it's not like we're raking in money hand over fist. It's not like we have a lot to spare, but there are tons of affordable or completely free ways. I mean, your time's not free, but financially free ways to support the arts. So sorry, I had to give that little spiel as well.
No, I love it. I had no idea that you get paid for like library borrows. That's amazing. Like it's Wow.
Nicest things people can do for me or for any authors when I have a new book coming out, contact your local library and request for them to order it in, because that way means they're buying the book and bringing it into the library. That's one more sale, only one more sale technically, yes, but that is lots of possible new readers for the book, which is incredible. So yeah, I absolutely recommend again, supporting your library, hugging a librarian as long as it's consensual, and, supporting these, bastions of community. Because I mean, I love my local library. My only complaint is because it's a small town library, they're only open like 3 days a week. So tonight they're open to 7 and I'm going.
This brings us to the end of the episode, and my last question, that is a call for action. I mean, you said some stuff, but if you have some other stuff as well that you would like to highlight, or if you just like to share a message with the audience to, inspire them to read, to write, to publish, to do whatever that they want with their lives.
I would just encourage people, to obviously write as you want to write. Like, I don't believe in shoulds necessarily. When you hear a lot of authors saying, oh, you shouldn't do this or never do this. I mean, cultural and voice appropriation, no, there are definitely just some no's. But I think to like really honor yourself and your voice and your place, and trust that if it's coming from within you, like trust that voice. I mean, I mentioned briefly the novel that I had accepted, and accepted very quickly. Shout out to Pamela Sess Press for loving the book so much. But again, it's narrated entirely by a sock puppet, and I was adamant that only the sock puppet should speak. The person who the puppet's attached to does not say anything directly the entire time, although people do speak to the puppet. And it did confound a few readers, early readers. And I didn't really understand why I was doing it, but I really wanted to keep it with just the puppet talking. And it occurred to me is that as someone who lives and often struggles with severe mental illness, I was really tired of feeling like my narrative was unreliable because I'm neurodivergent. So I didn't want to scaffold this person's narrative with neurotypical scaffolding to make it more palpable for people who are neurotypical. I was like, no, you're going to listen to the sock, and the sock can be trusted. Just because I live with mental illness, just because I've had some really bad spells, doesn't mean that I'm not a reliable narrator of my own life. Now, this book is not about me, but I wanted to give the grace to the character in the book that I never felt. So, I think this is just my way of saying, trust your opinions and trust your hunches. If you can back up why you're doing what you're doing, cool, keep doing it. If you had to be quizzed on why you're doing it and present it to a judge and say, this is why I'm doing it, and state your reasons, then, keep doing what you're doing and just trust yourself. I don't think that as writers, we necessarily know why we're doing what we're doing right away, but it usually falls into place. That would definitely be my advice. And of course, join us at River Street, join our nerdy little book community, and contribute to amazing CanLit. And, one of our goals this year is to get people reading more books in translation, which I think is so important, because I'm representing one book with a translation of Blaise Cendrars, and it's like nobody in Canada knows who Cendrars is, and I'm like, this is going to be fun because he is such a weird person, now deceased. But read widely and join us, and we'd love to hear from you.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking to me today, for finding time for it. Thank you for being so honest and so raw, and for showing up for yourself and showing us that we can find ways to deal with certain thoughts and emotions, and to grow as people through reading, through writing, that everybody deserves to do it, that it's something that each of us, it's our inherent right to write. So thank you so much. It was lovely, and thank you for the reading of The Purple Bear. It was very beautiful, and I believe that people will enjoy watching it and hearing it.
Thank you so much for having me. I respect and love your platform so much. And again, if there's anything I can do to support you, you let me know.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching this episode, for sticking around for the whole thing. I hope I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it inspired you to read, to join Riverside Street Writing, to maybe try reviewing stuff. I mean, the perk is you get stuff for free to read, and you get it before it publishes sometimes, so it's also very exciting and exclusive if you want it to be. Thank you once again for watching. If you enjoyed watching it, make sure to like and maybe even subscribe so you miss on any future episodes. We will have some other authors that you're collaborating with, so they might pop up. And also follow, of course, both Hollay and River Street Writing on social media. And that would be all for today's episode. Bye!